afternoon, and I'm very grateful to all of you for being here. My name is Eileen Chang Mattis. I've lived in the area a little more than 30 years. I lost count. But hostility, hate crimes, I think we like to feel like those are problems. We would have liked to think they were problems somewhere else. We might have at one point associated them with the Jim Crow era, or had some anxieties and hope that they weren't ballooning faster than apparently they have been. But lest we got our hopes up too high, the Gazette tells us that anti-Semitic acts have leaped 86%, and they're calling it a 3-month spike. And Salon reports that between the year 2015 and the year 2016, there was a 20% increase in general hate crimes. So I guess we have something to pay attention to. And that's what's in the news, but it's not always in the news. So that's one reason I think we need to take a moment sometimes to look at these issues. I think sometimes when I came home from school, my parents asked how it went, and I said, it was bad, the kids were mean today. Decades later, my mother said, I never knew that they said to you, why don't you go back where you came from? But that's partly what happens when we don't stop and focus our attention a little bit. So there's something grim. But I also wouldn't be here if I didn't really believe in humanity, really believe that there is hope, really believe that things are better when we learn from each other. When I was passing out flyers last weekend, I said we all have a lot to learn on this topic, and that's true. I'm real excited about the panel of people we'll be learning from and with. We have Bernard Clayton, who is founder of One Strong, and vice chair of the Black Caucus of the Iowa Democratic Party, and has a strong interest in addressing gun violence as a public health issue for which preventive measures exist. We have Dr. Kate Kedley, who's, I wonder sometimes what experiences she had and draws on from her years as a high school teacher in Arizona and Honduras, as an English language learner, teacher, her work with prisoners, and many other areas. Mr. Mohammed Khalil has been rearing up our newest generation of young adults at Kirkwood Community College, people who are going to help bring our city and our nation into a new era. And he will bring us also a Sudanese perspective and an Iowa City perspective. Dr. Ibrahim Shahata from Waterloo will tell us more about how things are there. He is president of the Islamic Foundation of Iowa and the Islamic Cemetery Association there. And all of these people, if I really shared with you all of the reasons that they are credentialed, important speakers for us to hear from, we'd never get to hear from them because it would be too long. So I'm keeping it short. Dale Todd has been a Cedar Rapidian since 1974, fortunately for us. He served 2 terms as Cedar Rapids Parks Commissioner starting in 1998 and built up our city in many positive ways, well, the city of Cedar Rapids, and is still building up the community as Vice President for Development with Hatch Development Corporation, so that people can have homes where they can afford to live. Meanwhile, Stacy Walker is a Cedar Rapids native. And from his grandmother, he learned lessons in resilience and hard work, which he is using daily now to address to Lynn County's issues and our needs, especially with respect to safety. Well, I don't know if I should say especially, so many issues, but including safety and a welcome for everyone as our supervisor for Lynn County District 2. This discussion will be facilitated by Valerie Smith, who's kind of done a lot of everything. She studied Middle Eastern and Arabic studies, Egyptology, and Southwest U.S. archaeology. She's also been a camp director and head lifesaver, so she's going to be a good person to help us all understand this conversation. Currently, Valerie is facilitator for CR Solidarity in Motion. As I said, there's so much more to say, but I'd like to hear it from these folks. We'll probably listen to this conversation for about an hour, seeing sort of where the energy level is, followed by opportunities for questions from the audience. And of course, we know schedules varied, and if people need to tiptoe out, we're just really thrilled that you came. Have I left anything out that's important to say?
I think that's good.
Thank you so very much.
Great. Well, Eileen gave a nice brief overview on the background of each of us here, but I'd first like to ask to go down the row, and we'll rotate who starts every question so we don't have the same person going first all the time. And fill us in a little bit about your personal and professional background that brings you here today. What have you experienced, or people you work with or know experienced in terms of facing hostility and hate crimes? Try to keep our initial answers to somewhere around a minute apiece. Since we've got such a big panel, I know it's hard, and if there's one that's extra close to your heart, you can go a little bit longer and we'll be fine, as long as it's not consistent. And I'll just say, in addition to what Eileen said, thinking back, I think the first time I dealt with issues like that was when I was the only girl in my industrial arts class. When I was in 7th grade, it was the very first year that they let students choose home ec or industrial arts. So it was 21 boys and me in that class. And most of them were pretty nice, but some of them were not very happy that there was a girl in the class, and especially not when I tended to finish my homework before some of them did. So there was some interesting interactions in there. Nothing violent, but, you know, what we would probably call microaggressions. When I was in high school at Washington, there was a group being formed called UNQUO that was hoping to improve relations not only between students of different racial and ethnic backgrounds, but between socioeconomic backgrounds, and even between like the teachers and the staff who worked in food service and facilities, because there's all different kinds of interactions where people don't understand and might act rudely, either on purpose or by accident. The most personal thing came when I was in graduate school, and I started getting close to another student who was an international student from Kuwait. And I'd tell my friends how interesting it was to talk to him, how we shared interests in Afro-Asiatic linguistics and political things, even though, you know, Kuwait's a very different political system than here, and how it was so interesting to share political values. And their response would be, oh, don't get too close. He's probably leading you on. He's probably married at home. You should see somebody else. And I'm just like, what, you know, these are my friends. So secondhand, nowhere near as bad as firsthand, but it gave me just an inkling. And I did get to testify in front of a grand jury and then in a sentencing hearing for a former State Department employee who had sent hate-filled phone messages and emails to the Arab American Institute when I worked there. They implied that, how can I put this politely, my female genitalia had a liking for men who happened to be Muslim, and said the only good Arab is a dead Arab. And the guy got sentenced to jail time, which was a relief, but still, that someone who used to work for the U.S. State Department could be doing that was jarring and eye-opening. So that's sort of how I got here. And we'd like to hear a little bit more about your personal and professional and community experiences. Bernard, can you start this one?
Well, I'm going to come at it 2 different ways. I'm more concerned about violence within my community.
I'm going to make a suggestion. Could you stand up and talk, because there's so much noise coming from the back?
Yes,
We
ma'am.
can't hear it. Thank you.
I look at it 2 ways. I'm concerned about violence within my community, and I see it and trying to bring solutions to it, but violence to come within my community, I have had to deal with employment discrimination. And I've had to deal, and probably the worstest thing that ever happened to me work and someone loosened up the lug nuts on my car and I was going down the highway and my tire came out. That's probably the most extreme thing, but as far as all time in the face type of violence, I haven't really kind of experienced that. You know, a little vandalism, name calling, but actually someone actually personally attacking me physically. That's been something that I can't say that I've been blessed that I have not. But I have not experienced that. I've experienced over the top of disrespect from police officers. Not that all police officers are bad, but I've experienced that could have led into violence. But fortunately, I was blessed that it did not lead into violence. So that's kind of my perspective on things, and I'm gonna sit down because I don't want to run on, but that's kind of my take.
So our story is Bernard and I, we are immigrants to this community. By that I mean, we both came here in 1974 to go to Coe College. My parents basically threw me out of the car and said, "You're on your own," and I've been here ever since. So this guy was one of the first people I met. He came from St. Louis. I grew up in Chicago on the south side of the city. This is during the 60s. We were sort of a unique Presbyterian church where the Black Pea Stone Rangers actually started in our church. And my mom started one of the first Head Start programs in the city. And she was this fiery, white Irish woman who was in love with this black guy. And back in Ohio in the 40s, it was against the law for them to be together. And so I grew up in that environment. I saw things during the 60s. I have a son with a disability, so there's another group that's sort of missing from this discussion. But once he had once he was diagnosed, I saw the world from his perspective. But I've been a student of politics, and I've watched over the years how hate has been used effectively to break up political bodies, to cause chaos, and to how it was used as an effective strategy by the Republicans when Nixon got in office, when Reagan got in office. And it's no secret it was used this time around. And while Donald Trump has been the best thing for Democrats as far as organizing, it's no secret that Barack Obama was the reason why these hate groups all of a sudden had a focus, and a safe space was created for them to ferment this hate and to break up the constructive dialogue that we thought existed. So I look forward to this discussion. A lot of old faith. Do we have any media here?
They were invited.
Okay, good. We can really have some fun. Good. Okay.
The revolution will not be told.
Yeah, gotcha.
Robin will get you.
Robin's got us.
Yeah.
Robin's got us. Yeah, Robin's media. My name's Stacy Walker. I'm a Lynn County supervisor here, recently elected in November. I grew up here in Cedar Rapids on the southeast side of town. I was raised by my grandmother, who took me in after my mother was murdered in Buffalo, New York, when I was 4, and the case was never solved. My grandmother was a remarkable woman. She went to college in her 50s. She went to Kirkwood Community College. She trained to be a nurse's aide. She raised me and my sister after she had to retire early from her job, which she walked to. She worked between Mercy Hospital and St. Luke's Hospital, and she had to retire early from her dream job because she had to raise 2 grandkids, myself and my younger sister. You know, in thinking about this event on the way here, my grandmother once told me a story about her great-grandfather and how he was reticent. He didn't talk a whole lot. And she asked her great-grandmother one day why she thought that was, and her great-grandmother responded to her, "Your grandfather hasn't been the same ever since I purchased his freedom out of slavery." And it was shocking to me because it was just like, here I am a few generations removed from when people who look like me in this country were sold and traded as goods and commodities. And for anybody who ever wonders how in this post-racial society there's still so much racial animus and hatred, you know, it's easy then for me to respond and trace a lot of these attitudes back to a time where people like me were treated as less than a human being. And when our Constitution was first ratified, we were treated as 3/5 of a human being. So there's progress, I guess. At any rate, I involve myself a lot in social justice issues. I've tried to pull the county government in a direction I think it needs to go. I've tried to make our county government more of an activist government and insert ourselves in the conversations I think we need to have. And it's an honor to be here with you. Thank you.
Hello everyone. My name is Muhammad Khalil. I am from...
Louder, sir, please.
Yes, my name is Muhammad Khalil. I am from Johnson County. I'm a professor in Kirkwood Community College. In Kirkwood Community College, there is a statement. They always said, start here, go anywhere. But I started in Kirkwood, and I came back to Kirkwood as a teacher. Yeah. And first of all, I would like to earnestly thank you for inviting me to take part of this interesting day. As we know, our founding fathers created the Constitution of the United States as a supreme law of the land in order to preserve representative democracy, balance of power between the branches of the federal government, and the individual rights of citizens, justice, liberty, and equality for all. We all from the same father. And I am very happy and lucky to live in this great area that I found the nice people who support each other, who empower each other, who add value to each other. I didn't feel specifically in this area, in Cedar Rapids, in Lynn County, in Johnson County, I found the very nice people. And I came here to share my opinions and ideas, and also to test my opinion and ideas against others' opinions and ideas, what is going on in our society. And we can work together as a team to achieve our goals. As you know that a sports team will not be victorious unless the team works jointly as a unit. This is why the events like this is very important to push and to succeed and to achieve our goals, because the power in this country with the group, and the group, when we work as a team, we can push our power to our representatives, to our voice being heard.
Great, thank you, Ustad Muhammad.
Hi, my name is Kate Kedley, and I grew up in a small town of about 700 an hour away from here. I went to UNI for my teaching degree, and my first teaching job was in the southwest corner of Arizona on the border of Mexico and California. I had about 45 students in my class, many of them in each class, and many of them were undocumented, and I learned from 5 years of teaching there both the legal side of being a teacher and working in a school, and students who can enroll, and working with parents who don't speak English. But also, I learned what it's like, you know, with those students. I was a cross-country and track coach, and a lot of times we had to travel, and our bus would get stopped by immigration, and the students were sweating, and they didn't have, you know, paperwork, and I had to talk with the Border Patrol about things like that. After that, I moved to Honduras. For 4 years, I lived there, 3 years teaching, and 1 year of doing research for my dissertation. And through working in Honduras, I've worked quite a bit with families who have immigrants in the United States, and also Hondurans and Central Americans who live in the United States currently. When I moved back to Iowa a few years ago, I have been teaching ELL at Kirkwood, and also in the Oakdale prison for inmates who are incarcerated, who are serving their sentences before they get deported. They are working on GEDs and an ELL, learning English. And I also adopted a child from Honduras when he was 15. He's 23 now, and so having to go through the process of legally getting someone permission to be here. I always hear people say, why don't they come legally? Why don't they come legally? Because it's nearly impossible, if not impossible for many immigrants. And so my experiences, I guess, in my professional and personal background are more closely related to Latino, specifically Central American migrants, which is a couple years ago there were the 60,000 child migrants on the border of Texas and Mexico. And my son that I adopted, he's got a number of cousins who were some of those child migrants who are currently undocumented and living in New Jersey. So thank you for having me.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing?
Good afternoon.
Are you excited to be here? Yes. Wonderful. My name is Ibrahim Shahata. I'm not an immigrant, not even a refugee, but I'm a citizen.
Amen.
Next year, I will be half Egyptian and half United States. So, growing in Egypt, I never heard about the word hostility. I never heard a word about hate crime among Egyptians. Regardless, whatever your affiliation, whatever your color, whatever it is, but the very first time I heard about racism or hate, what I consider it hate crime, was when I went to Alabama. Alabama the beautiful. Where I had some friends of mine, African American, wonderful place, Tuskegee University, if you all would know about it. Mix of everything. And I found one sister one time telling me, wasn't it true, Brother Ibrahim, that Jesus was back? I said, excuse me, what the heck are you guys talking about? And what does it make, a hell of a difference for being black or white or yellow or whatever? If we look at, this perspective from the religious aspect or human life aspect, it's completely different. Being an Egyptian, I had a lot of people respecting me because of some of the political leaders, and somebody hated me because of some of the political leaders. Looking at the life in here in the United States, it's a very emotional life. We are a country based on creating enemies within. And we cannot live, especially I'm talking about politicians, not the common people. And we will be talking a little bit more from my experience in about closer to 27 years in the United States right now. The different phases that we have seen, most of the time I lived in Iowa. We have some uniqueness in how we are approaching this, how we are living, how we are educating ourselves, how we are isolating ourselves from politicians. We should not be thinking about religious, discrimination as there is a discrimination against one religion. But as a matter of fact, within some religions, there are hate crimes happening. There are some hostilities happening. And we'll get exposed to, as we go, about all of these. So I'm glad to be here, at least to learn from one another and have my little contribution of my little experience. Even with asymmetry that people were getting discriminated just because you want to have a place of rest that people they think it's a threatening place against those who are living. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim. So we're going to get into the meat of the matter, and I'd like to hear from each of you, and this time let's start with Dale, and then you'll get to wrap us up. How common are hostile incidents, whether they're hate crimes or just microaggressions or just, rude behavior. What kinds of things do the people that you know or work with experience? And what kinds of things happen on a daily basis, and what are the kinds of things that happen once in a long time? And finally, making it a very long question, is there a place that these things tend to happen most? Is it at school or at work, out in public, online, in the media? So, what sort of experiences have you seen happening?
Personally, I don't experience hate crimes anymore. There's subtle things that happen, and I mean, this can go all the way back to the locker room. But I think what has happened is that since this election, it's very apparent that there was a line drawn in the sand, and it has created this ability for people. It has allowed people to express their sentiments more visibly, and it shows up in places like social media a little bit more frequent. It shows up in places of work a little bit more. But at the same time, what it has done, I think for a lot of us who might be on the other end, it has given us the opportunity to sort of say, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. And so we're aware of a lot more activity now than we used to be. It has been there consistently throughout the years since I've been here in Cedar Rapids. But I think it's much more apparent to us. And so that's why you see more conflict. Because good people are at the point where they're not going to take it anymore. So I hope that helps.
Mm-hmm.
Same question?
Yep.
I don't think I've been the victim of a hate crime. But I've certainly been the victim of people hurling racial epithets at me. And people are always surprised when I tell them this. They ask me, well, when's the last time somebody's called you a nigger? And I said, I got to think about it. And I'll say, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago. And they're blown away. And I'm like, yeah, right here in Iowa, it happens. And it happens all over the country. And I don't know if that rises to the level of a hate crime, but it's certainly something that no person ought to be subject to, because there's no place for that. There should be no place for that in our language. One of the things I will say is this: microaggressions are real, and those happen to everybody, and I think they happen a little more often. You can't find one African American that's grown up here in Iowa, probably in other places around the country, that haven't had the talk with somebody who loves them. And the talk is this: it's when you're a young kid and your mom or your dad, somebody sits you down and they say, hey, look, life is going to be different for you in this country, and I need to talk to you about how you are supposed to interact when you get pulled over by the police. And it's not because all police officers are bad. It is because there's a disproportionate, because of you being African American, you have a higher chance of not leaving that encounter with a police officer alive, for whatever reason. And that's a serious issue this country really needs to address in a meaningful way, and to get beyond the instant divide as either you are anti-cop or you are Black Lives Matter, and there's no in between, right? We got to get beyond that, right, and actually talk about this. I bring this up because there are entire communities of African Americans here in this city who don't feel safe when they interact with police officers, and that's a problem. Because if I'm jittery or I'm anxious or I'm nervous when I get pulled over, then that already elevates the situation with the police officer. And that's one of my biggest concerns, is how we as a community talk about this. And lastly, what I'll end by saying is this. These conversations are helpful, and it's always helpful when someone like myself or like you can get up and share your experience. But I encourage people who occupy positions of authority and elected officials, people who have a lot of political capital in this community, I encourage you all to find your voice on these really important issues, because it's more meaningful when it comes from other folks. People forget, Dr. Martin Luther King wrote a letter from a Birmingham jail that his target audience were white clergy members who were silent on the race issue. So I just encourage you all here to find your voice and be advocates for a lot of folks in this community who are struggling right now, and a lot of folks who need all the help they can get in amplifying this message.
And we'll talk about that some more later as well.
Personally, I don't have any experience for hate crime, and generally we are living in Johnson County, and Johnson County, in my opinion, and most of our community members, is a pretty place to live. Very nice people. However, you know, in everywhere there is a bad people and good people. I think maybe most of you have heard about what happened of one of the Sudanese American members. When he went back to his home from his work, he found a message in the door of his home that, "Go home, back. We don't like immigrants and niggers." And I think many social media, I think you found, maybe some of you heard about that. And we
This
had a
was
meeting with,
last year?
yeah, before, last year, yes. I think 5 months ago. And this is like, you know, all the people from Johnson County supervisors and city councilors and police department, all of them, and our community members, we make march in the street, and they support us, and they said that we are here every time, and they decided to do every 3 months or 4 months like a unity potluck to support each other and to see and if there is a bad people who has a hate crime. Thank you.
I'm going to speak from my perspective both as a teacher and as a parent of a Latino, Afro-Latino who did not speak English up until a couple years ago, and then I also have 2 white boys. When Boris is the name of my Honduran son, when he first came to the United States, he didn't speak a word of English. I was trying to he didn't have any paperwork, so he couldn't get a job. He was at school, and I was trying to get him to, do some volunteer work. I thought, like, oh, he could work at the front desk of somewhere and learn how to kind of talk to people in English, maybe run a computer. And everywhere he put in the volunteer paperwork, they'd call back, and I'm sure you can imagine what they wanted him to do. Can he cut the lawn? Can he mow the lawn? Can he do janitorial work? And things like that. And I would get on the phone and I would say, no, can't you do something? And they'd say, oh no, we don't have anything, for that. And so right away I started to sense how he was being treated differently, probably because of his race and nationality and his language abilities. When he was in high school, and my other white child is also a senior in high school now, I would go in and talk to the counselor, and my white child has like D's and F's, and no one has ever assumed that he would not end up at a university. But when I went to the counselor with Boris, I said, I just want to make sure that he's prepped to go do whatever he wants, whether it's, do lawn care, or whether it's, go get a PhD. Like, let's make sure he's prepared for it. And they would, say, like, I don't know, ma'am, like, I don't think you understand the situation. You need to be prepared that he might not, be able to get into any type of college. And no one ever has said that to my white child. And so when we're talking about like microaggressions and things, I see those all the time, and I wonder how it shapes students in schools when teachers are making these assumptions, when counselors are making these assumptions, even parents. I have to check myself sometimes about the assumptions I make about what my children are capable of, or what they should be doing. And so I think those experiences have taught me a lot as a parent, and how I teach classrooms. And so I think it's important for those of us who are ever out in public to check ourselves and think about what assumptions are we making about this student, this child, this person, because of their language or race or their nationality or what we assume it is. So those are kind of my experiences with microaggressions specifically.
I'll just pick what Kate just mentioned, actually. One time, one of my children, I have 3 boys, wonderful experiences with the school system here in Iowa. One of them came to me one time and he said that my classmate, and he was in the 3rd grade students. He told me, my classmate is telling me, you Egyptians, terrorists, get out of our country. So I just simply, wrote a quick email to the principal. And I said, I wanted the dad and the mom and that boy. I want to meet with all of you guys if you will not be resolving it tomorrow. They immediately called, the family. The father was in the army, in Afghanistan, Iraq, and all of these. And we know what they go through. And then as they come back, the kids can hear things that they can be a reflection of not their reality. So they are just like a mirror of what is happening in their homes. The kid was crying to death, and I said, I don't want him to be punished, but I want to straighten this out. Another time, this is a lot, by the way, being a Muslim and being a Middle Eastern, I'm randomly selected. To the level, one time, me and my wife and the kids, the 3 kids passed, without any checking. And the guys actually in the counter for the airline, they forgot, as they are letting me and my wife go, they said, wait a minute, we forgot something, that one of you is supposed to be randomly checked. Seriously. And I told them, how about that? Get a lady officer with my wife and get a man with me. So check whatever you would like to do. So the word hostility, yes, there is hostility in there. And I refer it to the lack of education, lack of knowledge. People, they are afraid to death if they don't know how not to use the GPS to go somewhere. Does this make any sense? So from this perspective, one time, as a community, I have been serving since I came to the United States, being a teacher. By God's blessings, I did research for 16 years. I did, a lot of, bachelor, master's, doctoral degree, and whatever, educating, in 3 universities in Egypt as well as in the United States. And I taught in Alabama and here. So I get a lot of mixes for immigrants, for refugees, for different people, especially, I heard about officers, police officers. And one time we were training the police officers, in Waterloo for continuous education about diversity. And one of the police officers, he said, I have 30 seconds. When I'm seeing something happen is not normal, I have to pull somebody over. How am I going to be actually dealing with my life on the edge for 30 seconds? How can I know that I'm safe, but I need to do my work? And of course, one of the major things with them, they look at a black person, African American, they will be assuming that he is going to kill them. So there is a lot of education, for Latinos, an example, they would be running away if they will be pulled over, or Middle Eastern. And people, they do not understand the culture aspect of it. With the ICA, the Islamic Cemetery Association, one time we tried to get a cemetery because Muslims, out of our respect to Christians, Jews, and whatever, we would like to be buried in our own cemetery. And when we were planning to buy a land in Waterloo, the whole entire east side of Waterloo, they were against the city council and the people in there. And what they did, They were trashing us in the zoning and planning, meeting, and taking these as a rejection to take one, sentence, saying we are scared of our culture. They are intruding our culture. They are getting in truckloads, talking about Muslims. They are coming with truckloads of people that they will be invading our culture and they will change us. You are going to bury somebody, you're not going to be threatening somebody that is going to be lying. So we, out of these, educated actually, and this is the piece of the major thing, the education. Once we educate ourselves, we can actually talk. We will be feeling comfortable with it. We can eat as the United States, and I hope this is my last sentence, we are in the United States can tolerate any kind of food. But the same food that we eat from these people, we have problems with some. Which is something that we need to actually start paying a little bit of attention, that we have a lot in common. We have a lot to learn from one another. And the major thing for each one of us to call something hostile environment or hate environment, how I take it. It's based on me, and if I tolerate anybody to call me something, whatever I accept, I'm promoting. And I will not accept anything to any human being, regardless religion, thinking, whatever it is. I'm not going to let anybody try to put them down and put them in these, but we will treat it and try to find solutions for it.
Very good. Bernard?
Well, following what you just said, I noticed during this period of time, hummus has become a very popular food in the United States. You see it in stores. When I first got introduced to it, there was a Lebanese family that I saw. That's why I first learned. Before it was commercially available in the store, Mrs. Moses made it very well. I studied religion at great. Better than anything you could buy in the store. But anyway, I studied religion at Cole College, and one of the things I learned was called the theory of repetition. And when Donald Trump got elected to office, my thing is Reconstruction had ended. I went back to the 1870s when Reconstruction had ended in America, down south, as far as having troops in the South. And what America was saying, and it was a majority white people, there were others, but there were Hispanics who voted for Donald Trump, there were black people who voted for Donald Trump, but the majority, they were saying that we are tired of experimenting with a multi-racial democracy. About 1965, when the Civil Rights Act came into effect, Voting Rights Act, and et cetera, and particularly the things that President Johnson created. Ever since then, the Republicans have been constantly trying to take that away. And Donald Trump is the icing on the cake. But we focus too much on one man. Yes, he's elected office and he's our president, but a lot of people support that ideal. If Donald Trump would go away tomorrow, we would still have these ideals, and basically we have a country that has a history of repressing people by force. We have that history. Generally, white people are immune to that, are kind of immune to that violence, unless they happen to be union workers. There can be times that it happens, not totally immune to it, but people of color, black people, which I know best, we're considered to be less than human. We're not actually really human beings. And even in this country, when we begin to stand up and talk about our experiences, immediately it's taken that we are whining, because it's that disconnect that we're really not humans. We don't have a right to talk about our stuff. Look, we're taking care of you guys. You really ain't, you are really not part of us, so please be quiet. And then we have a tendency to limit racism to the southern part of the United States. It's all over the country. In Iowa, it just happens. In the South, generally, individuals went out and took, but white individuals went out and did vigilante acts, and they dealt with black folks. In the North, that job was left mostly to the police department. That's how white people vent their anger and frustration. They vent it through law enforcement. They let law enforcement, you know, they kind of got a dirty job. I used to tell Cedar Rapids police officers, you got a dirty job. Your job is to enforce the law, and then the other part is to repress me. As long as you do it out of the view of camera and nobody knows about it, that's cool. If it comes out and anything comes a notice of, then you have a problem as an individual officer. That part of the job you shouldn't have. So violence in our society, that's how we deal with things. I'm listening to everybody saying, and even in my family, we've had experience of my great-grand-aunt being in domestic violence, being beat by her boyfriend, and she ended up having a stroke. My mother remembers that just like the day it happened. She was outside playing. Her mother left. Her aunt left the door open. Her boyfriend came, and she was taking a bath. Her boyfriend came in and beat her. Also, I had a cousin who I'm named after in the 50s. He was beat to death in Los Angeles because he would not join a gang. And also, I have a cousin whose father, who was running for the school board in East St. Louis, he was murdered by white people because he had the audacity to run for public office in East St. Louis. And imagine being killed for wanting to be a school board member. In some respects, that's kind of laughable. I mean, how we think about the school board. And then the next thing about the graveyard thing, I have a family graveyard down in Tennessee where my families are buried at the Dammer, where white people come do there. They come and put balls up on top of the tombstone and they target practice. And you can see how a tombstone looks after bullets have ruined it, and they push over the tombstones, they throw garbage in. So I kind of know about those things. And I had one cousin that we went to the graveyard, and she started crying when she saw how our graveyard was desecrated. She started crying just like she was at a funeral. That's how she did. Now I'm gonna go ahead and sit down, but we can deal with these things later.
Thank you. This discussion is very interesting. Each question is taking a little bit longer than anticipated, so I'm going to roll some of the next ones together.
Almost done.
Yeah, which is fine. So I'm glad to hear that mostly what we're talking about here is intolerance, microaggressions, some racist and anti-immigrant notes, rather than, you know, everybody said not so much hate crimes, although I'm sure that they do exist. When any of those things happens, who do people you know, or who would you yourself tell about it? Family and friends, religious leaders, Civil Rights Commission, law enforcement, school principals, you know, who do these things get reported to in real time? How much power do those people have to do anything to make it better, either comforting and providing support for the person to whom it's just happened, or making sure it doesn't happen again? And what kind of effect do these things have? Like, is it a lasting effect on people who are exposed to intolerant, racist, anti-immigrant behavior on a daily basis? So who do you tell, what can they do, and what lasting effects do these kind of actions have? And this time we'll start with Stacy.
Yeah, so I'll be brief. Tell everybody, all of the above, as many people as you can, because it's important that we have all of our institutions respond to these instances, particularly instances of hate crime, but instances of hostility, microaggressions. So tell everybody, and hopefully these institutions are willing and able to respond accordingly. What was the last part of your question, Valerie?
What's the lasting effect?
Lasting effect, yes. There is ample research now that demonstrates that stress can be passed down through genetics, through our genes. So you look at Holocaust survivors and their offspring, and we're able literally now to tell that these folks are still experiencing stress. Now, let alone a person's offspring. What kind of lasting effect do these instances of hostility have on the person? Well, as many of you know, I was raised by my grandmother, And she had told me stories about growing up in Opelika, Alabama, before her and her family moved to the south side of Chicago, and her experiences there. And you fast forward to when she was raising me in the 90s and the 2000s, she still had a mistrust of white folks. Now, does that make her a racist? I would say no. Her formative years were filled with experiences of people who were violent against her physically and verbally. She's got memories of, she's got immediate family members who were lynched in the American South. And she just would always talk to me about being careful, about, you know, being around some of my white friends. And I knew growing up that, you know, I had great friends of all different races, right? You know, I knew she just came from a different time and her experience was different. So I think there are immediate, lasting effects on people who have been persecuted or have been mistreated or, you know, have been the victims of hate crimes, as my grandmother was.
I agree with your latter part of that. Do you see how those trauma experiences she has passed down to you guys? Traumatic experiences passed down?
Well, you know, I guess the verdict is still out on me. So I don't know how I'm doing in comparison. I do know that my experiences as a child, growing up in some of the neighborhoods that I grew up in, seeing some of the things that I saw at a young age has certainly impacted who I am and what I choose to spend my time on.
My point being, some of the things that she was, that impacted her also impacted you.
I'm sure we can dive into a cycle analysis of my life, but I'm sure.
You brought it up, so I just.
No. You're absolutely right, and I'm sure. And I again, I don't know how.
I think we all need to be aware of things that happen in our different generations, how they impact us now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, part of what I was wondering is, does experiencing any of these things make a person less likely to take advantage of opportunities that are in the community because you don't want to, you know, go out at that time or go to that place or be around those people? So does it impact the diversity of opportunities that you feel you can avail yourself of?
Absolutely. One more quick comment I have, because that reminded me. If you guys haven't seen the movie Crash, I really encourage you to see it. It's a phenomenal movie that really talks about, in an interesting way, how we're all connected, how we're all related. There is a dialogue between one of the actors, and he is talking about how there was a white woman who crossed the street when they were walking towards her. And he makes mention, he says, you want to talk about being nervous? He said, imagine being a black brother going into a Starbucks in a nice neighborhood with a bunch of caffeinated white people, and you're the only black person. You're the only black person in the Starbucks, right? So there are absolutely situations where I think opportunities can be limited, because I know African Americans to this day that are uncomfortable around white folks, rightly or wrongly, right? And they miss out on experiences because they don't want to be in environments that are predominantly white, which is really, really hard to avoid in a state like Iowa. So those things are real, I think.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Depending on the situation, actually, you know, we need to make 100% sure it is me first to actually resolve the issue that I'm facing first. Unless if it is out of my control to actually implement the solution and I need some help. As an example, my brother was coming from Egypt and he's a professor. You remember, guys, about the shoe bomber? It happened to him that he was a graduate from Iowa State, and after 15 years from graduation, he came in here to do research, and he had at home, you know, a boot that he bought, that he never used for 15 years. And when he was coming during the winter, he decided to wear the boot. And the boot, right in the airport, one of the shoes got open. So he had, this wrapped around the boat. In Heathrow Airport, he let him in and it's okay because his luggages were already checked in. When he came to JFK, he actually, the second, shoe actually got opened again. So they actually prevented him from flying from there to Des Moines to come down here. And they took his shoes out, in the airport and let him stay with his socks for a whole entire night, a whole entire day, and came from JFK. He offered people, even, the TSA, to pay them to buy a shoe for him. And they prevented it. So they took his luggages, as an example, and didn't let him, go on the flight. They flew him the following day. We tried to get the luggages for 3-4 days without them even answering. Sometimes they would be saying it's in Egypt, no, it's in Chicago, it went to JFK, it went back to Heathrow, and I told them at one time, after 4 days, if I do not hear from you, airport and airline, if I don't hear from you within 24 hours and having the luggages delivered to my home, you will have an action coming from me. And I was at that time in Human Rights Commission. And I know the rules and the regulation and the games and all of this. Within 24 hours, they called me and they said, we need your brother to come to, take the luggages. And we can deliver it to your home, and we have TSA and FBI that they would like to talk to him. I said, no. You need to actually have, to make the long story short, we actually had a good discussion. They flew a team of FBI. I had some discussions with him and them at the same time because things can happen. So you have to take the action yourself, knowing the rules and the regulations, having the confidence that there is nothing wrong in me, guys. You do whatever you do, but and I can help you out in doing it, but do not play games. Okay? With the cemetery situation, the city council, we got in a meeting with the mayor because he was afraid to lose his position, because of the people that they elected him, so they passed something under the rug to accept their protest and prevent us from having this land, which we told them, we are not even safe to let our dead people right through your neighborhood if you are not even feeling comfortable with it. And because you are our neighbor, we respect it, and we will find another place. When we did this, the mayor himself, with the whole entire city, they found us a different land. So there are things that, whatever is happening, we need to start thinking, I can make a change. I don't need to be nervous about it. I don't need to be, they are bullying me, so I will put them back, and I will pay it, get even type of thing. We can actually find all of what it takes. When they put me at that time in the random check, at last, I told the FBI and the TSO guys, I told them, I need you to take that action to remove my name from there. It took 6 years from them. Every single time I'm traveling in a vacation or business, they say, Ibrahim, and there is some similarity of the name. I say, excuse me, don't play dumb to me, There is no Ibrahim Hussein Shahad Al-Alawi that he is having all of these, credits, who lives in Cedar Falls and who has these, and all my history. Don't tell me that there is an exact condition of a person that you are randomly checking me because of this person that might be dangerous.
So did it work?
It did.
Good.
They asked me actually to fill it out. I said, no, you fill it out. If you don't show me in your screen, which they will not do it, okay? If you can't show me in the screen to prove your point, you can actually do it yourself. And they did it, they removed it immediately.
Kate or Mohammed, did you have?
As Dr. Shahada said, when I first moved to the United States in 2015, and when I was studying in Kirkwood Community College, specifically in the culture classes. It said American ways. I asked it a question for the professor at that time. Why? Because this is the first time I heard about the hate crime also when I moved to the United States. I didn't know that about hate crime in all of my life. And I asked him, why in any application here, when we want to fill application, they said African American. They are Americans. They are U.S. citizens. Why they said African American and why they said white and they said black? I asked him why they didn't say that European American, because we all the same came from somewhere else. And this is what experience I had, and he said he had no any answer for that. And maybe this affect for many people about said that white, African American, Native American, they are all the American. In my opinion, in any application has to be U.S. citizen or permanent resident. Why they said that U.S. citizen, African American, black, white, and I don't know why. And I didn't find any answers until now. I asked many people here, and they don't have an answer. Okay.
Thanks, Kate.
I was going to speak to the question about who becomes aware of microaggressions or discrimination. Boris's family, I mentioned, he has about 20 relatives, cousins, aunts and uncles and such that live in New Jersey, and all of them are undocumented. And I was with them a couple weeks ago at their apartment. They all live in 2 small apartments. And I said, so how are things since, the election last fall? And they all just kind of put their heads down and they said, listen, Kate, every time someone knocks at the door, every time we walk outside, we are just petrified. Like, we don't talk to anyone. And I said, good, just like, don't talk to anyone. But if you can think about what that would mean to leave your house, like, should I take my ID with me? Should I not? Should I talk to this person? Is the store owner going to turn me in? Is my teacher going to turn me in? We all know how DACA turned out, the DREAM Act. All of those families registered themselves at the risk of being deported, and now many of their children or parents are being deported because they've been fingerprinted and registered. And so there's a real big fear of people in positions of authority, and I think that's a granted fear. I personally, I tell friends and family members, I say, listen, if you ever need to call the authorities, police or whatever, be careful about it. I personally am not going to call the police, even if I suspect something is being done illegally on immigrants or communities of color, because I know that the repercussions are going to be more so than what they would be for me. Even trying to get Boris's relatives to come for his graduation in December from Mount Mercy, what do? Put him on a bus, like with none of them have legal paperwork. And so even though they're not supposed to be deported unless they do something wrong, we know that that's not how it works. And so I think thinking about how different communities have to negotiate, even walking outside to the store, even going to Western Union to send money back to your family in your home country. These are really tenuous spaces for a lot of people. And so that level of stress that they have to deal with, I think, on a daily basis, in addition to maybe not speaking the language, maybe not knowing the culture as well, is a high level of stress that I think would be good for all of us to be aware of and think about. So.
Great, we're gonna have Bernard and Dale, and then Stacy wants to add something on.
Oh, man.
Yeah, you.
Well, violence and the threat of violence are both public relation tools. We use them to get things out of people. What has to happen in terms of reporting violence, the individual you report to have the courage to deal with the problem. Now, I really don't like the terminology hate crime, because when someone breaks the law if you can't prove that they are racist, a lot of times the rest of the charge goes away. So the point is, if a person jumps on me, I might know why they jumping on me, but the motivation is why they jumped on me. That's kind of important. But if you're looking at it in a totally legal term, either the person jumped on me or they didn't. Okay, if you're trying to prove that the person was a racist and you can't prove that, perhaps the rest of it goes away, and that's the danger of that category. I mean, that's, and I'm not going to pretend like there's no motivations for crime. I'm not pretending that, but I'm saying that's kind of how I look at it. Now, my main interest is in prevention. Once an action has happened, a person gets killed, injured, or you have that bad memory that you carry for the rest of your life, you can't take that away. I was in a situation it was an anti-Trump protest, and I was there. When the Trump supporters came out, they started taunting us. They came very close to being in a fight. I went across the street. Now, the police see everything, but I had to walk across the street and asked the police to come across the street. Initially, they told me, well, y'all grown people, y'all know how to act and shit. And I told the sergeant, because I went to the person who was in authority, but I asked who the commander was, and I thanked him. I said, well, thank you officers for what you're doing, and I walked away. Okay, it just so happened the tactic I used got the police to come across the street. They got across the street and got between us, and we were able to avoid incident where I felt personally was very possibly was going to go down. And and that's why I thought, and initially it broke up, and I was able to talk to some of the Trump supporters, and I explained to them, and they were men about money. I said, look, the young people that were Trump supporters, you couldn't talk to them. But I was able to talk to some. I said, look, we have kids here. I said, you grown, like I said, you got a right to have your opinion, but we got kids here, and we don't need any problems. They listened to me, they walked away, everything settled out, and then towards the end, we shook the police officer's hand because they didn't like being there. So that was my way of diffusing the situation. So prevention is always preferable over responding to the act. Always preferable.
Having had the opportunity to listen to this eloquent panel, I'm going to digress a little bit. I see this as a strategy that has been used to divide us instead of bring us together. I think it began with 9/11 and the pretense that we used to go into the war, which were basically false pretenses. What came out of that is we had to create a boogeyman. In a lot of our communities, our Muslim brothers have been the backbone of industries and of business and friends and restaurants. But we had a need to demonize them. And at the same time, with the Rush Limbaughs and the Breitbarts and the Fox Newses, what has happened in this country and in communities like Cedar Rapids, there's a great article in the Gazette today about Youngstown, Iowa. Youngstown is a lot like Cedar Rapids. It was a community that had industrial jobs where a person could get a union job and where they could get hope and they could put a mortgage on a house and buy a car. Well, once industrial jobs dried up and change happened, and the demographics in Iowa and in our neighborhoods, even like Marion, Iowa, which we all know, we don't go to Marion because you're probably going to get pulled over if you're a black guy. That's been out there since I came here to Cedar Rapids. As the demographics change, and Doctor referenced it earlier, as we got away from education, where in some places you teach creationism over evolution, it allows the folks that understand, it goes back to the Southern strategy that Lee Atwater used in the South to demonize African Americans in the hope that white people would come out in droves and vote, which they did for Nixon. Those same tactics are going on today. And so I remember when I got called a nigger at the Maid-Rite on a date 30 years ago, and the guy who did it, who was out of the service, he ended up on the floor. A good friend of ours who had a bad experience in a restaurant not too long ago here, coming out, I passed it on the way out here to Marion. She put it on Facebook, and she put it all out there, and within 2-3 days, the owner of that restaurant had about 30 emails. And when I saw him last night when I was having a burger, I mentioned it to him, and he said yes, and he apologized. And what happened there, in that event where we used to not maybe stand up like we did, Bernard made the point, you got to stand up now. And deep down inside, I think most people want to do the right thing, but they're scared, or they might not know, they're afraid of the repercussions. So we have to help them like liberals, that's what we did the last 8 years when they beat the hell out of Barack Obama with birther. You know, he's not an American citizen. You know, we thought that was going to go away. You know, but when they held Merrick Garland up for a year, didn't even give the gentleman the courtesy of a hearing. In the back of my head, I say, how much did race have to do with that? You know, even when they go, you know, when they look at golf, they don't want to talk about how much Trump's golfing now versus what Obama did. But those are the kind of things that when I add them up in the back of my mind, I sort of say, yeah, there's still the ugly underbelly of racism is alive and present here in this country. And so...
Yeah, Stacy wanted to add one thing.
Just real quick, Kate had mentioned, you know, how people must be feeling if they're undocumented, how the refugee community must be feeling. So in my position as a supervisor, I sit on the Lynn County Board of Public Health. And we have had so many conversations about how this change in the administration is literally driving undocumented immigrants and refugees underground. And that becomes a serious public health issue because the public health department is, you know, we administer vaccinations. Anybody who comes to this country, you know, we worry about that, right? Because they may be carrying diseases that we don't even think about here in the United States anymore, like polio, tuberculosis. And so if these folks are afraid to go into government buildings, our department here in Lynn County, we're actually having these conversations about how do we mitigate that? How do we find folks, get them vaccinations so that we're not looking at another epidemic here and our population isn't being threatened by diseases that we have, you know, have long since had under control. So I make that point because it is so important for us on Dale's point about education, to educate the general public, to educate people running for office, lawmakers, because elections have consequences. And you know, it's easy for me to draw a parallel between a federal election now and we are looking at some very real, serious health and life safety issues here in Lynn County because of it. So these issues are important, and elections have consequences, and our work should not end after an election. Our work is continuous. Progress is always out there in the ether, and we've got to work hard to chase it.
Have you had the discussion yet about carrying guns in public?
We're getting to that. We're getting to that.
Yes. Yes, I have.
That was a perfect segue. The remaining questions I had, and again, we're going to group these together. Have you seen, and some of you have already touched on these, have you seen changes in the nature or frequency of the kind of hateful, rude, intolerant incidents that happen over your lifetime, over the time you've been in Eastern Iowa, over the past decade, since last year? And what do you expect to see in the next few years? And this is where, Bernard, I hope you can talk about the Stand Your Ground legislation and what you see coming with that. Add to that, have you seen anything that gives you hope? And if not, what would give you hope? And finally, what can all of us here today do to help the most in either prevention or providing support? And you know, what resources would you direct us to help us learn more, to be more effective in helping out with this kind of situation? And I think, Mohammed, it's your time to start. Have you seen changes? What gives you hope and what can we do?
Okay. In this case, in my opinion, the united to be together, to support each other, because united we stand, divided we fall. And these words here are metaphorical. To stand means to succeed. To fall means to fail. Because members of a family, if they take care of each other and support each other, they live happily. Then when the people in a society live in peace together, social progress weakens. Eventually, when we work as a team and as a group, and we have a power, and unity can bring wealth and prosperity to our nation. This is what my opinion in this case.
Very good.
Thank you.
I'm also a member of the queer community, and I think I would probably say that we've seen a lot of progress in the LGBT community, both in Iowa, which was one of the forefront states in the United States, and also nationwide. And so I think some of the, I'll never compare sexuality and gender to race or nationality or a demographic like that. However, I think that the queer community did some interesting things that I would like, for example, people who are not immigrants to do. One of the things was, I remember one year, One Iowa, which was the marriage equality thing, sent out a mailer, which typically they would say, like, please donate $5 or $10, but instead they said, write down the name of 5 people you're gonna go tell, I'm gay, and, you know, and then your aunt and your uncle and your neighbors are going to say, like, oh, you know, you are? Okay, I guess we're okay with it. And so I would like all of us to start saying, like, listen, this is how I feel about communities of color. This is how I feel about immigrants. This is how I feel about refugees. And if you don't like it, okay, let's talk about it. And, you know, maybe I need to emancipate myself from the people that are not going to stand with these communities that need their support. So my hope is, I always feel like Iowa, we get sometimes a bad rap, but when we passed the marriage equality, everyone was like, what, your state, Iowa? And I'm like, no, like, we're just kind of passive about it. So let's not be so passive. Let's go out and say who we are and where we stand, and, you know, draw the line in the stand like everybody else has, and stay there and hold it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Are we seeing any changes? Yeah. But is it the changes that we are looking at? The cup is not completely empty, and it is not completely full. We can see how much is filled and how much is empty. What was the slogan for you guys when you heard about Obama, when he got elected, or what was the driver in the very first time? We can.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Fired up and ready to go.
When he won, what did he say? We can do it. Okay? Who we can do it? He meant African Americans. At the bottom of it. Okay? That, yes, our country, you know, the struggle that we went through, we can do it. And nothing wrong on this. Don't take it negative.
I was just going to say, when he said that, I felt included.
Okay? What is strong is slogan before he got in. We can make America
Great again.
great again. Who we? America's great. But he meant white. Take it from me. That's my opinion. This is what I have seen.
Amen.
The word is American, sir, and that includes all races. He wasn't just saying white people.
I think he was meeting registered voters.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's not argue about it.
I meant, by the way, these two situations. Because African American will be getting offended when they hear what Obama's slogan was, if I would be saying that he meant white, he meant the black. And the same thing with Trump when he meant the white. Meaning in here, racism, you know, can divide us. And by the way, politicians and media divide and conquer. That's how they can control. This is how they can play their game. This is their area of expertise. He was, as an example, you know, and until now he's still learning how even, you know, to move from a business person to become a president, you know, and this is an education for him more than we knew that it is a failure for all of us. Okay? Until we start educating ourselves truly. And specifically, right now, the scapegoat for everything are the Muslims. Any incident where the United States invaded Afghanistan, invaded Iraq, they are destroying, you know, right now Syria. We are participating in the whole Muslim world, and we are doing anything and everything against them. Okay? And yet, we are still safe. And the people that they are coming in here, like any other, people that they go anywhere in Europe or anywhere in the world. We are not the biggest country that are receiving refugees or immigrants. We are not. And we are not, by the way, one time somebody told me that you got the benefit. How much did you used to make in Egypt? I think you should be appreciable, appreciating that you are in the United States because you are getting a big buck. They told me that. And I told them, you know what? I went through so many years. United States did not pay a penny on me, but I invested all my experience in there, and I'm making more than 5 Americans at least from their education in United States that I'm getting less than what they are getting. And I did not say this as an offensive, but I wanted to educate the person. We have to look, the Latinos or the people that they are working in farms, we don't have people to work in these jobs because it's low-paying jobs. 85% of all the people educating, students in the colleges and the graduates, in the United States are foreigners. 85%. They are educated in their own countries or all over the world and coming to give us this experience. So the point from the education aspect, from the hostility aspect, I'm not going to accept the hostility from anybody. Because I know it's a lack of education from the person that he is actually, reflecting. He did not see the mirror who is his own enemy in reality before he talked to me. But he was reflecting out and thinking that we are threatening his job. If we had good jobs, we would have got it. Okay? Now, from the religious aspect, some of you may not be even knowing, and you have heard about the caricatures against Prophet Muhammad or destroying, the Holy Quran in some of the churches or some of the so-called priests and what have you, and they thought that they are going to ignite Muslims. By the way, it will ignite me as well as all the Muslims if any of the holy books would be torn out anywhere in the world, or any prophet or any figure. For us Muslims, we call 124,000 prophets, including Jesus Christ. Okay? If somebody offend him or offend any of the prophets, it is an offense to me. So the point of the education, what I did with my children and with my community and in Iowa, when I was in the Human Rights Commission or the school, we started educating the people, offering solutions. Don't keep bugging people of your problems. Provide solutions. And with it, people will start making a change. 1,000 movies made in Hollywood so far, picturing Muslims the worst. Yet in the last 10 years, Islamic centers and Islamic schools and businesses in the United States is skyrocketing. It is 75% since 9/11. In the 10 years after 9/11, in 2001, 75% more Islamic centers than in 2001. So it is an example for a lot of the demographies that is happening right now, the threatening of some of the people that they are afraid of changes. We need to help them out in us making solutions rather than complaining about, problems.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Bernard, and please do enlighten us as to the stand your ground concerns as well.
Well, I'm going to try to concise it. As a black person, do I see more or less? I'm saying right now I see more, but as a black person, I'm always in fear. All my life, I've always been in fear of my safety. From within my community and from without my community. I'm asking my physical safety. I've been blessed. Nothing has really happened to me. But again, we talk about how we dialogue. It's acceptable in America that America is scared of Muslims for the one Muslim that might attack them. That's kind of acceptable when you hear. But when a black person said we're scared of the one white police officer that might kill us, that's considered not to be a legitimate concern. So we looking at we're looking at this thing, and I want to disagree a little bit here. Sometimes we blame education. If we just educated people more, a lot of people who sit up these institutions are educated. They know exactly what they're doing. Some of what goes on in this country is not about being ignorant. It's deliberate, it's purposeful, and it's done for a purpose, to be in control. It's to be in control. And yes, there are people who don't know. In the Bible, they describe people as being sheep. Yes, there are people we are like sheep. But there are people who are intelligent enough to know exactly what they're doing. Plus, in terms of people in our age group, we have a very well educated populace in Iowa. If people want to find out stuff, they can find it out. And basically, the undergirding is just being fair. If you want to take everything out of the conversation, race, Islamophobia, racism, how all the isms, if you just took and pushed it to the side, we're actually talking about being fair with people. Okay, those isms allow people to be unfair. It allows people to justify the unfairness. It provides that disconnect. Because that's what happens. If we can disconnect ourselves with another person's humanity, we can mistreat them. It's easy for us to mistreat them, no problem. So those of us who have a religious background, I suggest that we pray, and then besides praying, put some legs on their prayer, because part of the problem that we have become complacent. We expect that we fix something. We always will have, even after this period of Donald Trump ends, and not this Donald, I don't want to put it completely on him, because it ain't fair to put it on him completely. Look what our legislature did here in Iowa. Donald Trump ain't nowhere near the legislature. He don't run the state of Iowa. So again, we have to be vigilant. We always have to be vigilant. We can never go to sleep. And that's what happens. We expect that we fix something, everything's going to work on fine. Okay, on the stand your ground law, it's a very dangerous law. Most states have put it in effect, and this is how they have done the gun thing. You can bring guns into public places, which is completely, and I did go to the State House and spoke in the hearing. I told the state senator, I said, you have even made it unsafe for yourself. And basically, with the browning of America, white people do not trust their public safety people to protect them. And actually, we're going back to the lynching tradition in this country. On thing, you don't have to have a group of your friends come together and put a rope around an undesirable person's neck. You have a gun. You can use it with a gun. Because some of the fears are unfounded. And even with guns don't really make you safe. Like for instance, and this is the negative side of me, if I knew you had a gun and I wanted to do something to you, I would not argue with you. I would simply just shoot you when I first saw you. That's what I would do. That would really your gun. A gun does not really necessarily make you safe. It puts a target on you. And we have people who walk around in our community with open carry. They make themselves a target. But also it's a danger when you can shoot somebody because you're scared of them. That's a problem.
Perceived threat.
When you can shoot somebody for a perceived threat, or if your property is being taken. It used to be in St. Louis when I grew up as a kid, if you were breaking into somebody's car, you could shoot them. It was perfectly legal. They stopped that. As I grew up, they stopped that. You couldn't do that no more. So we have to ask ourselves, has a person's property became more valuable? But again, this law is directed towards certain people, because the people who are directing this law don't figure nothing will happen to them. They figure that they are absolutely safe. There's no absolute safeness in our society. So what we have to do, hopefully, I hope that when I spoke in the hearing, I hope all my predictions about the law that are completely wrong, and even you in the room can laugh at me and say, Bernard did not know what he was talking about. I hope our murder rate don't go up. I hope innocent people don't get shot. I hope I'm completely wrong about that, and y'all be able to laugh at me.
Is there anything you'd like us to do?
What I would like for you to do is next legislature, keep on telling the legislature that this is not a good thing, and when something happens, point out the wrong. We as individuals, because each one of us have power. Each one of us have power, and we was talking about this today. I'm glad this crowd showed up. when Martin Luther King came to Cedar Rapids, only one black family met him at the airport. Not even a member of the current black clergy in Cedar Rapids went to meet him. And we have to make numbers count. We have to make our voices heard. When just like Cedar Rapids City Council, I called them and asked them, did they have an opinion? Elections are coming up. One of the things that should happen in City Council meeting, whether in Marion or not, what do you think about this? About people being able to bring weapons into your city council chambers or into your board of supervisor? What actions are you going to take? Are you going to challenge the state government about this? We have to begin to ask questions, and we have to be vigilant, and when we see wrong, we have to do it, and we have to constantly talk to our legislators. I know sometimes it doesn't work, but I believe you have to continue dialogue. And sometimes I got a joke. Sometimes if I lay on the floor and talk directly to the floor, I'm sure y'all would laugh at me. But maybe the floor will hear me before some of the people I'm trying to talk to. I use that as I lay on the floor. The floor might answer me quicker. So we have to continue to be vigilant. We cannot give up, and things are not going to turn over real fast, because what the current administration in this state and in the national government, this is something that's been working for 40 years. So this is not going to go away overnight. There's no magic solutions. We're just going to have to work at it.
I do blame Trump. I have no qualm saying that. What he did, he created this safe space for it to be acceptable to not just talk about these issues, but if you look at those rallies, we've never had rallies like that. You know, this is an anomaly. He took it to a different level. In particular, his speech yesterday to the NRA. Okay? And so what concerns me, and I believe these are some dark times for a while, when we knew that states were in the wrong, we had an Obama Justice Department and Attorney General to prosecute those crimes. Today we don't, that is non-existent. And so let's send stuff back to the states. You want to send stuff back to Alabama? You want to send stuff back to Iowa with this right-wing legislature in place. So when redistricting happened a couple years ago, that was done with one intent in place. When voter rights laws were implemented across the nation, including in Iowa, that was done for one reason. We won the popular vote the last election, but in these states, it's going to be tough to win that popular vote. And so you'll have to rely on that outdated system that we still use. And so to try to answer your question a little bit, there is a little bit of hope there for me. Newspaper sales are up. More people read the New York Times. People even watch press conferences nowadays. What we haven't done well in the past is invest in younger folks. So I'm glad to see in this front row here some younger folks, because a lot of meetings that we go to, quite frankly, it's our generation. And I'm even young in that. But I see these glimmers of hope periodically. And Anthony Arrington has periodically stood up and challenged people on Facebook, more than just said, hey, that's a dumb thing, but has tried to have credible arguments and make the case for why some of these dumb things that people say are not acceptable. And so, to use a bad analogy, but it's like, it's time for us to come out of the closet. What is so wrong with fighting for social justice? Peace, love, and understanding. What's so bad about that? This whole myth about terrorism, the scariest thing is a white guy sitting in his basement with an arsenal of semiotic and automatic weapons strapped to the tooth, That's what's happening in this country. It's not a Muslim. I mean, if you seriously look at the analysis of terrorist incidents in this country, it ain't Muslims. It's white guys that are running around doing dumb stuff, walking into schools and movie theaters, and just, that is our real terrorist threat. So what I have to do, I have to invest in guys like Stacy Walker, who's going to be around. Whereas years ago, a guy by the name of Joe Ayasi hired me, a Mount Mercy student who didn't know a damn thing, but to do research on a computer system, and it put $20 in my pocket once a week, every 2 weeks. But he did that because my hope was that he was making an investment. He didn't tell me that, but he thought that maybe I had potential, like maybe some of these folks are going to make a difference when we're gone. And so now is the time. It's an exciting time to be out there on the streets. People are marching. I know there's a march today. It's probably not going to be a great one. It's on climate change. The weather's lousy. But my parents took me to Washington and D.C. to march against the moratorium in '69. When King came to Chicago to march for affordable housing at Soldier Field, they dragged me out there. And so that's what we need to do with our kids. And if we do enough of that, I think we will change what's happening in our system. Okay? Thanks.
Yep. It's good to know that Joe Ossie was working on you 20 years ago.
I'm sure his wife was saying, are you sure about that, Joe?
More than 20
Yeah,
years ago.
I'm sorry, yeah.
He was, I've been in his living room and working for a young candidate who came to this country from Bosnia when their country was embroiled with war. An extraordinary story of a woman who came here, put herself through school, got a few degrees, and became one of the youngest women elected to the Iowa legislature and who ran for Congress. So he's been at it for a long time, and even as recently as a couple of years ago, and it's really good to have folks like that in our community. 2 quick points I will make. There was a gentleman who I think might have been offended here at something one of the panelists said. And I would encourage folks, if you haven't read the book, it's called Dog Whistle Politics. And the reason I'm encouraging you to read that is because when politicians say certain things, as Bernard pointed out, and Dale also pointed out, there is intentionality behind it. So when we were hearing in 2008, I want to make the White House white again, or take back our country, when we hear politicians, certain politicians talk about real Americans, working class Americans, or when we hear politicians even say we're going to make America great again, these are messages that mean certain things to certain people. And they're designed, they're tested. These messages are tested. They're designed for certain people to hear them and think certain things. When politicians talk about law and order, being the law and order candidates, talked about what Lee Atwater was doing with Nixon's campaign. Nixon was the law and order candidate. These are shortcuts that go right to a certain spot in the brain. And yes, Donald Trump was talking directly to white Americans. He was, trust me. I'm a student of politics, electoral politics. I've worked on many campaigns, and I've worked on messaging for campaigns. These dog whistle politics, in my opinion, it demonstrates a lack of intellectual depth on behalf of the candidate. It is unethical, and it is designed to divide Americans and pit people against people. Our current congressman is guilty of this. When he talks about real Americans, he's not talking about me. He's not talking about the Lebanese community. He's talking about a certain core constituency that is responsive to that. So I just want to encourage folks, you don't have to trust me. There's a whole body of science on this. It's called Dog Whistle Politics. It was actually written by a colleague of, or a guy who was in law school with with President Obama.
He went there the year, he went behind, he went to the same law school, but he went after President Obama.
After President
And
Obama.
he's from Obama, and he's from Hawaii too.
I didn't know that.
He's from Hawaii too.
I will finish.
What would you like us to do?
What would I like you to do? So I'll be quick on this one too. Look, if we want to change our society, you got to get involved. Not everybody has to run for office, but if that is what you think you need to do because your representatives aren't getting it done, then as Obama said in his farewell address, pick up a clipboard, get some signatures, and run for office. If you think you can make an impact by being a part of your local organization, then do that. If you want to be like Joe Ossie and work with young politicians and help them develop field plans and introduce them to people who can help them fundraise, then do that. The bottom line is we got to get moving because the forces of darkness and hatred are just as active, and they're a formidable threat right now.
Don't take my days off.
So they don't take any days off. Thank you. So we got to match that energy, and I think we've got. If one thing this election cycle has done, as Dale Todd mentioned in the beginning of his comments, it is that it has mobilized a lot of folks. We're in the midst of a new great awakening. Young folks are starting to realize how important this is. Folks are starting to realize, hey, it wasn't actually a choice between the lesser of two evils. Folks are starting to get engaged, and they're putting pressure on lawmakers. They're protesting. And it's a beautiful thing to see, and we've got to take advantage of this energy and roll that into every election cycle going forward. That's what I think we got to do.
Great, I think Eileen wants to ask if we can ask questions. I just one more thing that I think people here can do that's on a day-to-day human-to-human levels. The Catherine McCauley Center is looking for volunteers to help teach English and citizenship exam tutoring to new Americans and a lot of other things for people in the community that have needs after unfortunate actions. So if you want to do something that's more human and less political, check out the Catherine McCauley Center. You're welcome.
I have just really, we've gone long, but it's been so good. There's been a lot of energy and a lot of interest. I guess really a polite, hospitable thing would be to ask our panelists how they feel about going on for a couple of questions from the floor.
I don't mind.
How do you feel?
I have nothing to do this afternoon. He said he's going to buy me a beer because he stood me up for a meeting this week, but we're free.
I don't mind.
Yeah.
I personally don't mind.
I think it's fair to take, if somebody's got a, yeah.
No, we need to make this a conversation. Not to, I mean, it's going to be good if it's a I mean.
I saw a hand up.
Yeah, I guess it's more of a comment than a question. I heard a couple of the panelists talk about education, and something that I've witnessed through my interactions online and family. I think we're missing the point. Sorry, when we talk about education, there's a difference between book smart and street smart, and a lot of the focus with this last election and with what's been going on lately has been placed on book smart, and that's, I think, missing the whole point. I think we need street smart, where white people are probably the biggest problem right now. Instead of sitting back on the farm or sitting back in your white neighborhood, go experience these different neighborhoods, these different cultures. When I was a kid, my parents divorced early, and my dad was not the situation, and we ended up in a low-income neighborhood in Waterloo. And so I got to experience Black culture where it happens, and it's an amazing thing watching how Black families interact with each other, and it's something that I missed out as in white culture. And I think that is the education that we need to focus on, is interacting with people that are different than us, and that's where tolerance occurs. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
To support Clayton's observation about some educated folks on exactly what they're doing, in the last 40 years, some of the number one Holocaust deniers have been college professors.
I guess I didn't mean to take it from you, Valerie. Let's hear.
Well, since there's clearly a resource scarcity and allocation problem, just like the rest of all of us in politics, and we've got a lot of themes of what should be done, but I was wondering, in your expert opinion, what policies are correlated with creating racially harmonious societies? Where should we focus our resources? Okay? Yes. More specifically, I mean, what I think we need to overcome, how do we overcome very entrenched feelings of cognitive bias, racism, just whether, conscious or unconscious? That's what I'm most interested in focus on that.
Who wants to take that first?
I'll take one quick stab, and simply because what I do is housing, with work in neighborhoods, and I go back to sort of when King first came to Chicago. And one of the reasons Chicago has a lot of problems because it's one of the most segregated cities in the world. When people have the opportunity to interact, like this gentleman said, and you learn that other people are not a threat, that you actually have commonalities, then you have a chance to build this sense of community that helps stabilize neighborhoods. When we build neighborhoods that are segregated, and here in Iowa, there is a lot of that, then we build the wall between different cultures and different races. And so by a concentrated look at urban planning and where affordable housing developments are laid out, I think that would be a subtle way to start build this sense of neighborhood a little bit more.
A quick follow-up question. Well, how do we incentivize it, though? Okay.
That's a good point. You need another panel for that one, but socially, there is this thing that we've gotten away from. Spike Lee's got this great movie called Do the Right Thing. And developers are astute enough to know what is the wrong thing and what's the right thing. And so you still have to build incentives into it, but morally, there's a right thing.
Did you want to?
Go ahead. Okay. Kind of going along with Scott's point, and also with knowing President Trump has actually looked at eliminating some of the incentives to do integrated neighborhoods. How do we kind of overcome some of the stuff at the local level? Like with Crestwood Ridge, which was an apartment complex going in on the northwest side of town, that has gotten a successive application. There's a lot of attitude and NIMBYism that really defeated projects like that, affordable housing projects. And how as an activist, or how as a local activist, do you think that I can work on kind of addressing some of that NIMBYism in trying to get like affordable housing into the community, especially since the northwest side is like the area of town that has least amount of affordable housing, because when it was brought to the city council, it was all put it on the southeast side. Put it on the southeast side, that's where all the services are. That's where affordable housing exists already, but that's not what the goal of like HUD is. So yeah, basically, how as a local activist can I address kind of that NIMBYism, that type of attitude, especially when they don't come out, just outright say, I don't want these people in my vicinity. I don't want these people in my neighborhood.
Organize.
But what I would think, all the questions they have, once you knock them down and take care of that, you're gonna have to affect that direct. You have to affect that directly. There's no simple answer. Now, in my understanding of it, and then I study this stuff. The two things that white people look at that make them white: first of all, the amount of education they have, and the proximity in which they live near large numbers of black people. Okay, and I sit in a room with a group of white people who I live in Wellington Heights. I live in the southeast side. I actually sit in the room of a group of adult white people, and they were talking about how their co-workers made fun of them because of where they lived at. And some of them were actually interior, but they made fun of them. So the short answer is that they have all these questions, they're not coming out with it directly, answer all these questions and get those taken care of. And then when it comes up, you have to deal with it because we're getting a little bit more open about our dislikes, but most people don't want it to be known that I don't like certain people. They don't want that necessary. They don't want that label on front of them. If they can do it on the slide, yes, we'll do it. So the long story short, that's how you would meet it. In terms of bringing people together, if we all have to tell, because this is based in money, economics. If I can't make a living, then I feel threatened, because another thing that white people have been told in this country, as long as you're a white person and you at this certain level, you're never going to fall down here. And at least you better than the unmentionable. No matter what your situation will be. I won't use that word, y'all grown folks, y'all feel that one, and I won't use. So they have been told that you better, and then even other people are you know, we think about black folks, but other non-white people, just like when Lebanese came to this country to immigrate to this country, they had to go into court because they weren't taking people from the Middle East into the immigration, so they had to go to court to become legally to be concerned as being white people, so they would be allowed to immigrate into this country. So the long story short, we have to bring everybody up economically equal, and it's a good book that, and I know everybody don't read it, I understand. Some people watch movies, there's various ways of learning. But a good book to read would be The Trouble with Diversity. Read that book, it's an interesting book.
Just on that, I said organize, and I didn't mean to be short with you. But we know who these city council members are. And we know that the city council appoints members to the planning and zoning, it's a commission, right? Planning and zoning commission at the city. And if we don't like how they're behaving on these projects that aren't going to cost the city money, that are going to help people, that's going to be a pilot project, then we should change who our representatives are. And I know I'm going to get killed for saying this in public, but we need courageous people in office, period. And so when folks are not representing the best interests of their constituents because they're afraid of pissing off some developer who's lining their campaign coffers, then we got to change who those folks are in office. And we got to encourage people who know a lot about housing and who want to do housing the right way to run for office. And we got to support those folks who look at these projects and say, hey, that's a good idea. These folks aren't going to jump up and bite you because they live next to you. You got to get over it, and we're going to make this happen in our community. That's called progress. And so to me, it comes down to organizing. I know that the city of Cedar Rapids hates when I start talking like this, but it's the hard truth.
I feel the same, yeah. Some of you were at my talk 2 weeks ago, the Saul Alinsky thing. There's money, and then there's people. And so more people can beat the money, but then what's the other lesson? You got to do your math. You got to know your vote count. How many people do you need? You want the Board of Supervisors to do anything? 3. How many to get to City Council? 5. So you need to know your vote, and you start working those votes. So.
Ibrahim wanted to make a comment, and then Ayman, you had a question.
One of the things before we actually leave, because this can address actually, the point of education. We are not well educated internally in the United States, and we are not even aware of what is going on around us. So the point of education, one of the major things that we need to actually start thinking thoroughly about it is do what you say and say what you do. And do it right based on your principles. Now, this is too much verbiage. It's not applicable in many cases because really, one time after 9/11, I had a panel and I was in the same panel or maybe bigger with mayors of 2 cities and FBI directors, senator directors, and people in hospitals, and what are we going to be doing, after this attack, and how can we be ready for another attack? And one of the big pieces that we're missing, that we talk about things, like here, regulation, vote, and whatever. By the way, democracy in the United States is a failure. And we have to be frank with this. From the percentage-wise, ask any professor, if the winner gets a 30%, what would be calling this? Number one. Two, religiously speaking. And I'm not going to be hammering the white, because the black also have a problem. The Muslims, they have a problem. Okay? The Christians, they have a problem. The Holocaust having a problem. What did we do with the Holocaust when Hitler killed so many Jews? They gave them a land that it is not belonging to them. And instead of giving it to Germans, that they actually kicked them out and burned them and did all of these atrocities. So, from the religious aspect, all of us, you guys remember, do to your neighbor what you like them to do, or deal with them as you like them to deal with you. Love your neighbor like what you love them to love you, and all of right? Isn't that? Christian, Black, African American, they say that in their churches, and white African, American or white Americans, they will do the same, in churches. The same thing you find it in Islam. You will never become a believer until you love for your brother. This is addressed to a brother, or your sisters, what you love for yourself. Now, one of the major things that I would like us to be left with, there is an ayah in the Quran, the Holy Quran. It says, "O you people, we have created you from a single male and a single female, and made you nations and tribes, so you can know one another." The purpose for us here is to know one another. And there is someone of us is better than others. That's natural. And the one that is the best of all these nations and tribes are the ones that fear the Lord the most and do better for their people, not for themselves. Politicians are bullies, but we are making them bullies. We are enabling them. There is nothing that forces us to choose from the lowest two evils. Why we are not having too good to choose from? Why we are always looking at everybody is worse, but I would like to get the less, the bad, than the worse or the worst. We have choices in here. Education, one of the missing elements in the United States, that I grew in the Middle East, I grew in Egypt. And religion was part of the classes from first grade until the 12th grade, and included even in the colleges per se. When we have an Islamic class, the Christian classmates, they have their own classes at the same time. And never I heard about racism, hostility, and you guys and we guys, and all of these. Would love to start thinking, what I'm doing myself. Am I making, everybody equivalent in opportunities and challenges and rights and responsibilities like me? And if I'm promoting these, I can actually expect it from you. So I hope we can take these, be active. One time, a couple of weeks ago, there was a professor, Christian professor in theology at UNI, and he gave a presentation about Prophet Abraham and Moses and Jesus in the Holy Quran. How they are pictured in the Holy Quran. And as he was giving the presentation, he was giving the presentation from the verses in the Holy Quran, and he was referring also comparable verses in the Bible and the Old Testament. And all the audience, over 100 people, they were saying, what is going on? Are you actually, bringing the Bible and you are claiming this is in the Quran? But it was the reality. 98% or more in all religions, they are the same teachings. But what the politicians do, they concentrate with the media. And think about it. Politicians can spend $1 billion to control the minds of the people than spending hundreds of billions of dollars make their lives better.
So what can we do about that?
Now, and this is number one, you know, if we are on this level, get involved in the schooling. Get involved in your community. Get involved in your city. You know, I made a change for all the people living in my county to change the rules and the regulations of the people that they are indigent, so they don't have money and they would like to be buried. But the enforcement at the time, for 80 years, it was a Christian cemetery, because the majority were Christians. Nobody thought about Muslims, nobody thought about Jews, nobody thought about anybody else. So I worked with the officials at that time, you know, from the human rights aspect, as well as the rights of the people themselves. And they were very understandable. We made a change in there. You know, now we have a voice. We hate what Trump is doing, like others, they hated what Obama's doing, like many that they hated what, you know, Clinton did, and so forth. But are we doing anything personally to make that transitional change? We always get excited for 16 months in the process of election. After that, we sleep.
And I think we've got a couple more questions in the audience. First.
I do have a
Okay,
question.
we'll go Iman, and then I saw this gentleman had his hand up, and then you.
This is for Stacy, and then I talked about the Senate task force. Somebody else has one?
Yeah, Iman, and then him, and then you.
So I got from Stacy, tell everybody and organize, and I got from Ibrahim, education, and you mentioned education. I don't mean formal education, I mean like this kind of education, like this kind of.
As well as for
Know each other, learn from each other, work together, that kind of education, not in the school, not in the formal way. I think that's what I mean.
we need to enforce it in school.
That's true. And the other
Because
part
the
is,
generations you know, that are coming, they will not have the time. All of us, we don't have the time, by the way, after too many hours of work every day, we don't have the time actually even to go watch the news.
That
So I
opens a
need to
whole
say,
other kettle of
the
fish that we
news
think we
is
probably
not-
need a new panel for.
yeah, it's not the news education, it is not the public school education, as far as I know. When you mentioned 1,000 movies that was recorded as there's a book called the Real Bad Arabs,
Yep.
and it has 1,000 portrayals of Muslims in the Hollywood. But the education, the organization, organize, work together. I also wonder, some communities are shy and scared, and Kate and Ibrahim talked about that. Shy and scared, and it's not necessarily to put the responsibility on them, it is to put the responsibility on us. Because, tell me what you think, I mean anybody. I think some communities, we cannot blame them, they are scared, they are shy. Maybe you can blame them a little, but it is our part, it's not these communities' part.
But
Tell me what you think.
I wouldn't blame anybody, but first off, we all are leaders, and I was reading something Nelson Mandela said. He was making the speech, and he was getting ready to get booed by his people. He said, I have a responsible as your leader to tell you the truth. We have the responsibility to tell people the truth, all of us do. Now, there's always risk in telling the truth or standing your ground on something. There's always risk. We have to be willing, and then there ain't no place where you got courage stored up at, or you got faith stored. You always have to work there. You know, I don't have courage stored up in me when I go face it. It's not there. So it's something we have to constantly work on. We have to constantly tell the truth, and we have to think about, and it's something my mother told me, if you're going to do something and it's going to make you feel good, it's probably wrong. So when I approach a situation, that I always go back, I mean, and since I've gotten older, I always go back to my mother and my grandmother. Some of the wisest women I ever know. And when I get ready to do something, I think about my mother. And if it's going to make me feel good, I don't do it. Because generally, when you're going to do something that's going to make you look like I confront people on this thing. I'm only going to be there to edify myself and to make myself look big. So when you do something, make sure that's the motivation. And then one thing I should say to everybody in this room, our public school system is under attack. It pretty much is not going to be in the system. We are going to have to fight to keep our public education going. And everybody, and I'm sure that I'm speaking to the choir here, but most of y'all are aware of stuff. So there's one thing that we have to work out is protecting our public education system. It needs to be it needs to be protected and to be preserved.
And if I can say again, the follow-up to democracy is a failure. It is a failure because of us.
Right.
It is not a failure in itself. It's a failure because we don't engage in it. That's our part.
It's a lack of
It's our
participation.
failure.
There's an insane amount of money in politics as well, and that's affecting our democracy. It affects the integrity of our democracy.
Well, as you said, votes and money. And
Votes, yeah.
which one will win? I mean, I don't know exactly. But
That's the test we face.
Even if democracy is working on here, which is not, we should be actually promoting democracy in other countries that we are invading, and we are not making it enjoying the democracy itself. And that's why we are threatened, or they play the game of threatening us and putting the game of fear in each one of us so they can control us, or so they can get all their businesses and the incorporation and the oil and every single thing that they are enjoying and we are not.
We're getting a little outside our scope, and I believe this
Okay,
woman had a
yeah.
question, and then after her, Robin.
I speak next?
Yep.
Yeah, you. Stacey, this is regarding the recommendations of the Set Task Force to the City Council. Now, with those recommendations, how are they going to be followed through?
Yeah, that's a great question. The question was, so I co-chaired the Safe, Equitable, and Thriving Communities Task Force. We worked with different community folks for over a year, including Bernard and Dale and a lot of folks in One Strong. The question was, what's the follow-up? So the follow-up is this. The task force as an entity has dissolved, but the recommendations remain. So I personally, along with Dr. Mary Wilczynski, who's the co-chair, have been meeting regularly every month with the chief of police and with the city manager, Jeff Pomerantz. And I also meet with Dr. Pramod Dvorvedi, not only in my role as a board member in the public health department, but also as a supervisor. And I ask for progress reports. Now the other subcommittees, and Dr. Buck with the school district. There were a few other subcommittees like housing, community engagement and outreach, and even economic development that I have admittedly less follow-up with. Those, the law enforcement and public safety, the issues with studying gun violence as a public health issue, what we're doing about closing the gaps between economic opportunity. Those are the issues that I've dedicated most of my time with. But as I said from the beginning, the community has to own these recommendations as well. Because in addition to me trying to follow up and implement those things in the three buckets that I mentioned that I think are most important, that take sort of primacy over all of the other recommendations, those are the things that I got to focus on to make sure we get those done first. And I also got to be a supervisor, right? So I need folks in the community to own some of these other recommendations. And to that end, I'm right now planning sort of a community exhibition where we bring together as many folks as we can, including leaders of nonprofit organizations and all of the other institutions that were part of the task force. And we present the information again, present all of our updates, which we're making a lot of progress on. And then I don't think we leave that room until somebody owns every one of those recommendations and said, you know, United Way, we're going to take over this. Or this group of people in this in the community, we're going to work on this one. But, you know, the task force never envisioned one Superman to make
No, it's going to take a lot of folks. It's going to take, it's not going to get done overnight. It's going to take years.
Right.
So I just wanted, I heard the task force had dismantled, so I wanted to know what was that recommendations.
Yeah, we're working on it. And I will say this, the police department to the credit of Chief German, has made some incredible progress on implementing the recommendations, not only from this task force, but from President Obama's task force on 21st century policing. I think Wayne German deserves a lot of credit because there is a certain culture that he's having to navigate.
And with that being said, I want to say this. You know, we're looking at a public health problem, and to have Chief German trying to tackle that, to me, is kind of it's backwards.
He's not trying to tackle it, but he's working
But
with...
he's kind of spearheading it.
That's not true.
It's not true?
Nope. Pramod Dwivedi, the Director of Public Health, is working with officials from the University of Iowa's Public Health College of Public Health. And we have an epidemiologist on staff in the Department of Public Health. And he is just, in fact, I met with him maybe a couple days ago. He relayed to me that they are in the process, Chief German turned over all of the crime data that he has, and they are in the first process of analyzing it. So Chief German is not leading that process. But he's working.
It appeared like he was spearheading that process. That's where I'm coming from. You say, no, he's not.
I mean,
Because it's a public health issue that needs to be spearheaded by the public health department.
and that's exactly what's happening, but we can't do it without his help. So I mean,
But I understand, yeah, we need everybody's help. It's an interdisciplinary.
Absolutely. Yep.
Great, thank you, that's great clarification. Robin, did you have a question?
Well, sort of, comment. Most of the comments I've heard today have to do with personal experiences of violence or racism or ethnocentrism. I haven't heard a lot about institutional racism and the policies that get enacted by groups like the supervisors or the city council that have an impact long-term on the conditions that people live under and live in. Bernard and Dale and I live in a neighborhood that is the result of policies that were enacted long ago and that continue to this day and are largely unmitigated. And they are reinforced by the politics, in my view, that emerged after the flood of 2008. There was a struggle following that flood between the city council and the business community. The business community wanted to run the redevelopment or the recovery from the flood, and they succeeded in co-opting the government in Cedar Rapids and got rid of a city manager who wasn't doing what they wanted done. And brought in a city manager who was very pro-development. The leadership of the city council represents an oligarchy that assumed virtual control of the city. So in a practical way, getting involved, I've been involved for 10 years since I've been in Cedar Rapids, and have tried various ways to try to help improve not just our neighborhood, but the community. And so what I consistently run up against is oligarchy and its elected representatives and those people who do business with the oligarchs, the developers or the people who have aspirations to be developers. That those policies continue to work in our community. The neighborhood that Bernard and Dale and I live in is the most densely populated area in our city. And dense population has consequences in the way people behave. And we see the results of that episodically. So I'm saying individual initiatives and so on are fine. But somebody mentioned a mass movement or a movement of people in order. I kind of grew up with Saul Alinsky myself. And Hostility was a big one for mobilizing people and for doing things that are very un-Iowan in order to affect the results that he and his cohorts were trying to affect. And so I think if we're going to change the politics of Cedar Rapids or Marion's politics, or I'm not acquainted with it, but the Cedar Rapids is the gorilla or the elephant in the room. And they're the ones that Cedar Rapids kind of calls the shots here. And that's why we have the council that we have, and we have a much more progressive board of supervisors than we do city council.
Very, yes, sir.
People are just, I mean, people complain. People are simply going to have to become involved. What's going to take to motivate them? I don't have all the answers right there, but people individually, because you get this thing, well, I won't make a difference. I don't want to do this. People have to go forth. And by the way, as far as our community goes, it goes back further than the flood. It goes back. There was a plan called the Coal Mount Vernon Plan about the development of the city. That's part of what's going on. See, what's going on now has been worked out and that's even before I came to Cedar Rapids. And I've been in Cedar Rapids for like 43 years. It was called the Coal Mount Vernon Plan. So that's kind of how the development is. That's kind of how the development is going. And I still think, even with our current leaders, if we get in there and face the right way, we can make some dents in it. Again, it's not going to be a easy road to go and money in politics. To run for a part-time city council job in Cedar Rapids, it costs approximately $20,000 to $23,000. That's what's in people's war chest to run for a part-time job that pays about $3,000 a month, give and take. So there's a lot of power in there, but people somehow we have to have charismatic leaders that can motivate people and want people to get involved. We'll come out. We can fill the park with a bunch of people after somebody gets shot, but we can't get those people to go to a school board meeting or even go to a school board election. So we all in for when there's a shock or something, immediately we all show up to it. So
seems like I never heard truer words.
Robin, I just want to comment though quickly. Institutions are functions of the people who run them. So we cannot diminish the fact that it's super important to focus on who we elect or empower in those institutions. Because Barack Obama's Justice Department was extraordinary. It's one of the best Justice Departments we've seen since maybe the Kennedy or the Johnson administrations, right? It's not that way anymore. Our Justice Department is not that way anymore, and why is that? Because who is a part of that institution? Who has now taken over that institution? I worry about the direction HUD is going to take, because who has filled that institution? So I recognize, and you make very valid points on institutional racism and the impact institutions have on society and our culture. But we cannot undervalue or diminish the fact that institutions are filled with people. And we've got to be mindful of who those people are and what agendas they have, because they levy the power of the institution on society.
Institutions are filled with people.
Yeah.
And it also takes two legs to walk. And we focused a lot on the individual issues. We can't walk only on the individual issues, and we can't walk only on the institutional issues. There may be so much there that it would be worth developing its own special panel discussion and really exploring that too. We could go on forever. We do have people who need to be somewhere. We'd like to hear from Joe Ozzie for a real short time, and thank everybody to go.
In 1950, the United States made about 95% of the cars in the world. Today, this year, there's going to be 100 million cars produced in the world, and we're going to produce 15% of them. Okay, now this illusion that we have about, we are 5% of the world, and we're gonna do 100% of the war, has gotta be gotten rid of. People have to wake up to the fact that the rest of the world has caught up with us. And it's time that everybody else gets, and you know, you hate to think that Trump was right on one issue, but the rest of the world's got to start doing more, and we need to bring our warships home. Thank you.
That might be another panel.
Yes.
But there are many pieces to this. I am so grateful to everybody who came. As I said at the beginning, we understand different people have different schedules. Some people needed to go out. Valerie, I heard them say that swim teachers are told always to end the lesson when the child still wants more.
Yes.
Is that right? I want to thank all of you very much. We have a